Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, you will learn 13 common baking mistakes when baking at home. Make sure you like the video first and click the subscribe button and click the notification bell to get updated on my new videos. Number 1. Overmixing the cake batter. This is by far the most common baking mistakes all new bakers make. They mix and mix and mix and they dream all lost in their thoughts, and the result is a dense and gummy cake. Poor cake. Well, mixing cake batter is addictive, but you need to stop doing this. How to avoid these baking mistakes? Mix just till everything comes together. Number 2. Baking in a cold oven. This is like expecting a hot water from a geyser tap which is not switched on. You are not going to get it. It is the same with baking. You need to preheat the oven to get things working. If we consider the same analogy of a geyser, it needs some electricity to produce hot water. Similarly, there is some heat required beforehand in the oven to start the baking process. How to avoid this baking mistake? Preheat the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit and 180 degrees Celsius for at least 10 minutes. Opening the oven door too often. This is one of the most common mistakes in baking after batter overmixing. Do not tip and say hello to your cake. The cake inside will not appreciate it and may sink. The reason behind this is your cake batter has air bubbles which expand till your cake has a structure and who rely on the heat for expansion. When we open the door, a lot of heat escapes and the temperature inside the oven change. An analogy here is of our moms asking us not to open the refrigerator door in our childhood days. The cool air escaping through the fridge would only make the fridge work more. Same with the oven. How to avoid this baking mistake? Do not open the door. Number 4. High temperature in oven which leads to burnt tops. Did you know all ovens are calibrated when they are manufactured? What the heck is calibration? This is nothing but telling the oven how much heat it needs to produce inside when you set the oven to a particular temperature. This is a baking mistake we do without realizing. Oftentimes, it happens that if we set the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, for example, it is highly possible that your oven is not calibrated accurately and will produce more or maybe less heat for a particular temperature, resulting in baking fails. In general, ovens are off by 10 to 15 degrees plus or minus. How to avoid this baking mistake? Use an oven thermometer. Number 5. Adding all eggs at once. Adding all your eggs required in the cake recipe at once will do you no good, and them one by one, which will ensure that they are incorporated properly with the cream, butter, and sugar. One thing you can do is break them in a bowl and whisk together, but add whisk egg mixture little by little in the cake batter. How to avoid this baking mistake? Add eggs one by one or add whisk egg little by little. Number 6. Not adding ingredients in proper order as mentioned in the cake recipe. There is a reason the recipe author asks you to follow the cake recipe instructions. For example, butter is a cream in the first step as it make it very fluffy. Air is incorporated inside it to make a fluffy cake. If you will skip this step or add melted butter instead, this will take a hit on your final cake as the air bubbles which were supposed to make the cake fluffy are absent. Number 7. Using a small cake tin. This baking mistake is very costly. Whenever you use a small cake tin which fills up till its neck with cake batter, it is a given that your batter is going to overflow while baking. If it does not overflow, chances are the cake middle will sink after baking is over. Why? The limited space available in the cake tin to the remaining cake batter is not enough to accommodate all expanding air bubbles, so it either overflows or sinks. How to avoid this baking mistake? Fill a cake tin only till the 2/3 mark, or use the cake tin size mentioned in the recipe by the author. Approximating the ingredients. You have definitely heard of this. Baking is a science. Well, of course it is. And so every teaspoon of that dry ingredient plays a role and is very important. The way in which you measure ingredients and weight liquids lay the foundation of your cake. How to avoid this baking mistake? Make sure your ingredients are perfectly measured till the last gram. No approximation ever. Substituting ingredients. Not only baking soda and baking powder, you are not supposed to substitute even milk for yogurt and yogurt for eggs. Why? Because the consistency and the final weight of these ingredients are very different from each other. Your cake will not have the same texture as with original ingredients of the recipe, and as every ingredient plays a vital role in this chemical reaction called baking. You would not consider substituting ingredients like you do in cooking. Needless to say, baking soda and baking powder have different roles in baking, and substituting them for each other is a sin in baking. Your cake will be a disaster. How to avoid this baking mistake? If you do not have an ingredients on hand, try another recipe. Nowadays, recipes with different ingredients are available very easily on the internet. Try those, or plan to bake on another day when you can arrange all the ingredients before starting to bake. Number 10. Not using parchment paper or not greasing the cake tin properly. Parchment paper will not let your cake stick to the cake tin. Works like magic, trust me. If you are thinking about cutting costs by avoiding this one, you will pay a higher price. If your cake stick to the bottom and you are running short of time, you can also go with the oil flour method, but parchment works the best. How to avoid this baking mistake? Use parchment paper. 11. Trying to demould when cake is hot, or handling cookies when they are hot. When a cake comes out of the oven, it needs some time to settle down. Underline these words. It needs at least half an hour to come to normal temperature and half an hour more to cool down completely. So do not even consider demolding your cake after half an hour, even if it seems completely cooled, as it is still warm on the inside. The same goes for cookies. Cookies are very soft when they come out of the oven at around the 10 to 12 minute mark, and eventually harden once they start cooling down. How to avoid this baking mistake? If using parchment paper to line the cake tin, let the cake cool down for at least 20 to 30 minutes in the cake tin and then invert it on a cooling rack. If you have used oil flour method to coat the cake tin, wait for at least 45 minutes before you invert it on a cooling rack. Number 12. Not recognizing the hot and cold spot of your oven. Every oven has hot and cold spots. What does that mean? Your oven is hotter in few places and generates more heat there as compared to a few cold spots where that much heat is not generated. Oven calibration and servicing is very important too. Best place inside the oven to bake is in the center of the oven. How to avoid this baking mistake? Placing your baking tray in the center of the oven or rotating it midway while baking in regular oven servicing. Number 13. Baking on stove top without proper setup which burns your cake base. Nowadays, people have started baking on stove top, which is marvelous thing on its own. But without the proper setup, your cake is destined to burn. No pun intended. You have to imitate an oven setup where your cake will receive a heat evenly from all sides and not only from the bottom. How to avoid this baking mistake? Make sure the gas flame is not set on high and you have the correct setup for it. These are the common mistakes to avoid while making your cake. Now you know what you are not supposed to do to get your cakes right.